The title of today's show is Crafting Standout LinkedIn Content Tactics for Amplifying Influence. My name is Shalini Manjunath, and welcome to this special edition of the Cloud Collective podcast. Today, we will be talking with social selling expert John Coons as he shares valuable advice for those embarking on a social selling journey, especially some of the pitfalls and mistakes many B2B enterprise sales executives can make before they even get started. Welcome to show, John. How are you doing today?
Hey, Shalini, it's great to be here. Normally, I'm the podcast interviewer, but today I get to switch roles and you're interviewing me. A lot written about crafting standout LinkedIn content. So you and I spent some time trying to develop guidelines for some of the folks we work with, some of the social sellers. Thought it'd be a good opportunity to share some of our thoughts and insights.
We are excited to have you, John, and we would love to talk more on all the tips and techniques you have to give to all our listeners. Before we get started, could you please talk to our listeners and the audience about your background, education, and experiences so they can know personally who John is?
I'll try to keep it brief. In a nutshell, I have spent most of my career working for a single company, IBM. And about a year and a half ago, because of the spin-off of the services division, I've retired from IBM after a 37-year career, mainly focusing on sales management, running practices, and things of that nature. Today, I do some podcasting on the side. I do some blogging, mentor startups, and I do a lot of not-for-profit board work. I'm pretty busy, but it's exciting and fun to share some of the war stories I've experienced over the last few decades.
That's fantastic, John. And I'm sure we will have a lot of audience who would be interested to know you more. We will be doing other topics in other episodes, and everybody can get to know you and us as a team more. Now, the next thing I'd like to ask is what are some significant benefits for the companies that successfully leverage LinkedIn content into their overall sales strategy?
Sure, this is an interesting area as a topic of debate, especially for those of us on the B2B enterprise sales marketplace. But selling and buying has changed over the last 25 years. I think the real benefit is that the buyer tends to look for subject matter experts. They no longer call up salespeople to educate themselves on products or services. If you can establish yourself and your personal brand as a thought leader, then you're going to connect and resonate with potential buyers and even your current customers. So I think the strategy is helping each person become a personal brand. That in turn helps the company's brand and ultimately gets you into the door to sell more product and services.
Thanks, John. That's a good tip because most of us are very focused on having the content and just sticking to the branding part, but we all forget to brand ourselves and being more relevant and resonating to the products that we are talking about. So, this is really great. And what are the most common mistakes companies make when attempting to optimize their LinkedIn presence based on your experience?
Spent a lot of time researching this over the last few years. A lot of it comes out of the work I did with startups and even some of the not-for-profit board work I've been doing. And again, goes back to in today's world, the buyer's journey. So if we're trying to target specific buyer persona, we want to connect with that buyer early in their journey, not when they're still in their discovery phase and even in their consideration phase. We get to them too late in their buying phase, which is the traditional point in the sales process when most enterprise salespeople try to talk to a prospective buyer or a prospective customer. We're probably too late. Some of the things you can do as a social seller on LinkedIn are simple. There are people that make a career of trying to sell you consulting services on how to leverage or game the LinkedIn algorithm. But I think if you think about it, like all social platforms, and we're focusing on LinkedIn primarily because it's B platform versus some of the other social platforms, which are more suited for a business to consumer market. But those of us that spend our time selling enterprise solutions, complex, longer sales cycle solutions, you can do some of these things pretty quickly. I think the first mistake is people ignore their LinkedIn profile. A lot of people set it and forget it, as we like to say. I think first thing you should consider doing is revamping your profile and do it periodically. There's a couple of key things that people don't do, and I think they should do. One is if you haven't activated your LinkedIn profile to be in creator mode, that's a 2-second thing. And the reason you want to do that is it signals the LinkedIn community that you're actively sharing and engaging and you're a creator and you're a thought leader. Assuming you're using the platform to be more of a seller and less of an online resume, getting your profile to reflect that is important. The other thing I would say is continue to add connections strategically. Figure out who your ideal persona is or your avatar that you're trying to sell to and and increase that network by adding connections. I think LinkedIn will allow you to do up to 100 connections a week, but don't spam them. Engage them, connect with them, and then begin to try to build a relationship just like you would if it was face to face. So those are probably the two most important things you could do to your profile. And there's a couple others that we've highlighted in some of the blog posts we've written. But I think just if you did just those two things, you would probably show the platform and the people on the platform that you're serious about being a thought leader. I think the other thing is next is when you're creating content. A lot of people don't create impactful content. The biggest mistake I think people make when writing and posting content on LinkedIn is they don't insert a call to action. You want to continue the discussion, right? You want to build a back and forth discussion with your audience.
Yeah.
It's not about being a social influencer and going viral. That's good and fine if you're in the entertainment business. But if you're in the enterprise business to business selling business, it's more about finding quality prospects and quality buyers and enhancing your relationship with your existing customers. Having a call to action at the end of your article or post is important because you're inviting the customer to continue the discussion. The second thing, understanding the algorithms, and we'll get into that in a second. You want to conclude your posts with relevant hashtags that make sense. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest piece of advice on crafting content is just be authentic, engaging, and consistent. That will build strong relationships with your connections and your audience. And the last piece of this is just the actual algorithm itself. You could spend a career trying to understand the algorithm, and I'm by no means an expert in this, but there's some really simple mistakes people make. I think the biggest mistake people make is they post and ghost. They put up a nice piece of work, but then they just go away. And so the key is engage your audience. Make sure you are commenting on their comments, you are sharing other links and things like that. The second piece is I think people overdo the formatting. In other words, they either don't tag anybody or they tag too many people or they don't use hashtags or they use too many hashtags. What I've read and the research I've done suggests to be selective in your tagging and maybe 3 people or so. If you have too many people you tag in your post, the algorithm's gonna flag it as spam. The second is limit your hashtags to maybe 4 to 6. They recommend a mix of what you would call, hashtags and then broader hashtags. Again, you're not looking for hundreds of thousands of views. You're looking for quality views and trying to connect with the prospective buyer. We talked about consistency. This is more of a marathon than a sprint. If you do it once a week, post once a week. If you do it once every other week, do it every other week. The algorithm will benefit you for being consistent. It will degrade your views if you are inconsistent. Timing matters. The algorithm looks at the first day or two are the most critical. So if you can engage your audience in the first couple of days, you'll have greater reach and range. And the last thing, which is an interesting one, and I don't totally understand it, but a lot of people put external links into their posts. And if you think about it, that's LinkedIn doesn't want to do. All social platforms, they don't want you to leave the platform. They want you to continue to be there. So the recommendations I'm hearing, like a call to action, if your call to action is to go download a white paper or sign up for a consult or something like that, which would require an external link, don't put it in the post itself, put it in the comments sections. It'll also shows the LinkedIn algorithm that you are trying to engage your audience. So that's a couple of mistakes people make and some of the ideas we have on how to improve it.
Thanks a lot, John. That's a lot of tips, and some are very easy to achieve, like getting the creator mode on. And the consistency part sounds easy, but yes, we all have to strategize on building our
Mhm.
pipeline and then going about managing the consistency in whatever manner, weekly, monthly,
Yeah.
quarterly, not quarterly, maybe weekly, bi weekly, and monthly. So I've taken away a lot of good tips. And I'm sure for our listeners and the audience here, we will be sharing all the blog posts you've written regarding these tips and techniques, which could come in very handy for them. Yeah, we are looking forward to follow you on the blogs as well, John. Thank you. Now, the next question I have is, what advice would you give to someone considering embarking on a social eminence journey? I'm sure like there are a lot of people who just want to get started and they don't know
Yeah.
where. Can you just talk to us a little more about it?
Sure. We highlighted some of this already. The key here is focus on your profile, write quality content, and try to do some simple things to maximize or amplify your influence on the platform. And just little simple things like solid call to action, being authentic. Like anything else, it's just getting out there and doing it consistently. Most of us are not journalists. We're certainly not professional broadcasters, but here we are on a podcast trying to share some of our insights and tips. One thing you can do, and we'll put it in the show notes, there's an ability to check your social media eminence on LinkedIn. I would go check that and after trying a few things, see how it improves. It'll tell you where you stand within your group and it's an interesting statistics. That would be my call to action for you folks is to go check your social selling index.
Thank you so much. That was a great interview, John. There were some very important tips I have taken away personally for myself too, and so would our audience. But just before we let you go, if you were to summarize this entire thing, how can people learn more and get started with crafting standout LinkedIn content? Anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I've hit most of it. In the show notes, there'll be a link to my LinkedIn profile, and I'm certainly encourage you to reach out and connect. I'm pretty much of an open networker. I'm happy to share with you links, and we'll put them in the show notes to our three-part series that we just talked about, which is crafting standout LinkedIn content. So those two things I would say are the easiest way to continue this conversation after listening to this podcast.
Thank you so much again for sharing with us everything that you could talk about building social eminence for people representing big companies or like an individual who want to just get started on their social eminence journey. And thank you to all the B2B sales executives in our audience for joining us for this fantastic presentation about the mistakes surrounding optimizing LinkedIn profiles, content, and the real truth about how to avoid those mistakes and get better results instead. So, again, I'm Shalini Manjunath, and thanks for joining us on the Cloud Collective podcast.